They always told me I was dramatic, that I made things up, that my feelings weren't real, only childish exaggerations. Maybe that's why it took me so long to realize the truth, that my parents never wanted me, not from the very beginning. Some people can point to a single memory that broke them. I can't. My life was a collection of small cuts, paper-thin slices of cruelty that piled up until I was bleeding everywhere and nobody noticed. Or maybe nobody cared. Take birthdays, for example. I don't remember ever having a real one. Not with balloons, not with cake, not with laughter or friends. When I was 7, I baked my own cupcake in the microwave after school. Just some flour, sugar and cocoa mixed together because I'd seen it on YouTube. It came out dense and half-cooked, but it was mine. I stuck a match in the middle because we didn't have candles, lit it, and whispered happy birthday to myself. That night, my mum and dad were busy helping my brother assemble the mountain bike they'd bought him just because. They never forgot his special days, or my sister's. She had parties with streamers, dolls, clothes, even a backyard bounce house one summer. My mother fussed over every detail, making sure her princess had everything perfect. When it came to me, though, Mum's eyes seemed to glaze over, like she was looking through me instead of at me. It wasn't just birthdays. Christmas was the same, every year without fail. On Christmas morning, my siblings would tear into brightly wrapped packages while I sat on the floor, empty-handed. Sometimes Mum would toss me a pair of socks or a book they'd picked up on sale, no tag, no wrapping. When I looked disappointed, Dad would bark, "Be grateful. At least you got something." But here's the thing, I wasn't jealous of the gifts, not really. What killed me was the silence. No hugs, no kisses on the cheek, no Merry Christmas, sweetheart. I didn't want toys. I wanted love. I wanted proof I belonged to them. When you're a kid, you try to make excuses for the people who hurt you. I told myself, maybe I'm adopted. That would explain everything, wouldn't it? Why else would my parents treat me like a burden while pouring all their affection onto my brother and sister? I scoured the house for clues. Old photo albums, paperwork in Dad's desk drawer, anything that could prove my theory. But every time I searched, I found nothing. My name was written on the birth certificate. My baby pictures were there, tucked in the corners of albums, though fewer than my siblings had. I wasn't adopted. I was theirs by blood. And they still hated me. That realization twisted something inside me, because if they weren't forced to keep me, then they were choosing this, choosing to ignore me, choosing to love everyone but me. And that meant I wasn't just unwanted, I was despised. I kept quiet about it for years, because who would believe me? My relatives adored my parents. Teachers admired my brother and sister. To the outside world, we were the picture of a happy family. If I spoke up, they'd say I was imagining things, that I was bitter, jealous, unstable. So I stayed silent. But silence doesn't erase pain. It only makes it fester. By the time I was 15, the pain had hardened into something sharper. Resentment. Resentment became rage. Rage became obsession. And obsession grew into a plan. I didn't dream of revenge in one sudden spark. It was more like a slow boil, a simmering pot left too long on the stove. Every insult, every forgotten birthday, every time my sister was praised while I was scolded, it all added fuel. And slowly, carefully, I began to think, if they won't remember me with love, I'll make sure they remember me with fear. I started keeping journals when I was 14, not the glitter-covered kind my sister carried around, filled with doodles and crushes and half-baked poems. Mine were confessions. Secrets I couldn't say out loud. Letters to no one, and to myself. Page after page, I bled onto paper what I could never speak. How it felt to watch my father's eyes soften only for my brother. How my mother's voice changed into honey when she spoke to my sister, but turned to acid when she spoke to me. How silence sat at the dinner table like a second shadow beside me. At first, it was therapy. Then it became strategy. because writing things down forced me to notice patterns, weaknesses, the cracks in their perfect little family facade. I noticed how much my father cared about his reputation. He strutted like a king at neighborhood barbecues, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, bragging about his wonderful family. If anyone ever questioned that image, even lightly, his jaw would tighten, his smile falter. Reputation wasn't just pride for him, it was armor. I noticed my mother's fragile ego, how she thrived on compliments about her cooking, her outfits, her amazing parenting. How a single ignored dish, a dress no one praised, could send her storming into her room with red-rimmed eyes. She wanted to be adored, worshipped, envied. That was her oxygen. And my siblings. They were golden only as long as someone was clapping for them. My brother sulked when a coach benched him. My sister crumbled when a friend didn't invite her to a party. Their worth was built entirely on other people's approval. Without applause, they were nothing, so I learned to play along. I smiled when they expected me to, nodded when they insulted me, pretended I didn't notice when they forgot me at family outings or left me off the Christmas card photos. On the surface, I was quiet, obedient, unthreatening, but inside I was cataloguing every weakness, every trigger, every pressure point. The journals became my secret weapon. Each entry was a blueprint, each observation a thread I could tug when the time was right. I didn't scream anymore, I didn't beg for love. I became invisible on purpose. And here's the dangerous thing about being invisible. Nobody sees you coming. That's when the seed of obsession sprouted. It wasn't enough to survive their cruelty anymore. I wanted them to feel it, to choke on the same silence they shoved down my throat, to squirm under the weight of being unseen, unwanted, unimportant. I didn't know it yet, but I was already designing my revenge. If they made me invisible, I wrote one night in jagged ink, then I'll erase them from everyone else's memory. And once that thought took root, there was no turning back. Revenge didn't come to me like fire, it came like ice, slow, deliberate, calculated, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones until you don't notice you're freezing anymore. By the time I was 17, I had stopped wanting their love. What I wanted was balance. I wanted them to live inside the same hollow silence they forced on me, to know what it felt like to be erased. So I began. My brother would look into the stands searching for me, his face falling when I didn't cheer. My sister would ask, "Don't I look pretty?" And I'd glance up from my book with a distracted, "Oh, sure." Just like that, the golden children began to dull. I wasn't cruel, not openly, I was careful, methodical. My silence became a weapon. And oh, how sharp silence can be. But silence alone wasn't enough. I wanted the world to see them the way I saw them. So I started rewriting the story of our family. When neighbours asked about us, I painted myself as the dutiful daughter who helped around the house, who stayed quiet, who never complained. And then, with just a whisper of sadness, I'd add, "It's hard sometimes, being the forgotten one." People leaned in when I said things like that. They remembered, they pitied, and slowly they began to shift. At gatherings, relatives would pull me aside, asking if I was okay. Teachers gave. The thing about silence is that it's contagious. Once you plant it in a house, it spreads like mold, seeping into every corner until the air itself feels heavy. That's what I did. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't throw fits, I just withdrew, calmly, deliberately, and let the emptiness do the work. It started with my siblings. My brother, once the golden boy, began to falter. He wasn't used to not being worshipped. His whole life had been a stage, and we were his audience, clapping, cheering, validating his every move. But when I stopped, something inside him cracked. He'd glance into the crowd at his games and see me sitting there, arms crossed, no cheer on my lips, my face unreadable. He hated it. One evening, after a loss, he cornered me in the hallway, hissing, "Why don't you ever clap for me anymore?" I shrugged, as if the question bored me. "I figured you didn't need me. You've got Mum and Dad." The words landed like a knife. I saw it in his eyes, the flicker of doubt, the sting of being dismissed. It wasn't about applause, it was about what it meant. If I didn't care, maybe no one else really did either. He started chasing praise harder, demanding more from our parents. When they didn't deliver, he erupted, slamming doors, sulking in his room, lashing out at teammates. The shine of the golden boy dulled, and whispers spread. Coaches grew tired of his temper. Friends stopped idolizing him. He wasn't the star anymore, just another angry kid burning out. Then came my sister, the princess. She craved compliments the way some people crave air. Without them, she suffocated. I starved her first. No praise for her outfits, no admiration for her hair, no wow at her endless selfies. At first, she brushed it off, but then her friends started to follow my lead. A subtle roll of my eyes, a quiet murmur of, "She's trying too hard," and suddenly the glow around her dimmed. The same girls who once begged to borrow her clothes now said nothing, or worse, snickered. Her perfect little kingdom crumbled brick by brick. She started avoiding mirrors, tugging at her sleeves, reapplying makeup in the bathroom between classes, only to wipe it off minutes later. Her confidence bled out of her, slow and steady, until all that was left was a shell who picked at her food and stared at her phone, waiting for validation that never came. But the sweetest fall was my parents. My father's reputation, his armor, his altar began to crack. To the world, he was the successful man with the perfect family. But when neighbours at barbecues began asking careful questions about me, about whether I was doing okay, I watched the twitch in his jaw, the way his hand tightened around his glass. He laughed them off, but his laugh was too loud, too forced. And when we got home, that laugh turned sharp, his voice like knives. Not at me, never at me. He couldn't risk the guilt. Instead, he turned on Mom. Their whispered arguments at night grew into full-blown wars, voices rising, plates clattering, doors slamming at midnight while I lay awake, smiling into the darkness. And Mom, oh, Mom unravelled fastest. She was addicted to admiration, obsessed with the picture of herself as nurturing, glowing, beloved. But gossip travels fast. Relatives whispered that maybe she wasn't as gentle as she pretended, that maybe she favoured some children over others. Her fragile ego couldn't take it. She retreated, pulling the curtains closed, hiding in her room with tear-streaked cheeks and mirrors she couldn't bear to look into. The house that once smothered me in silence was now drowning in it. Meals were eaten in separate rooms. The laughter, the forced smiles, the performative, happy family act, all gone. My siblings avoided each other. My parents avoided me. And I sat in the middle of it all, calm, composed, watching them rot from the inside out. For years I had begged for attention, for affection, for even the smallest crumb of belonging. Now the tables had turned. They fought for my attention, my approval, my smile. But I gave them nothing. It was poetic justice. I didn't have to lift a finger. I didn't need to scream or strike or destroy. I just let them live in the emptiness they had created for me. Only this time, I was the one who decided who got acknowledged and who didn't. The cage of silence was theirs now, and I held the key. Revenge didn't come to me in flames. It didn't explode like thunder, number. It came quietly, like frost creeping across a window pane, slow, steady, impossible to stop. By the time I turned 20, everything had shifted. I still remember the last Christmas I ever spent in that house. My brother sat in the corner, sulking, scrolling through his phone like a sulky child. The coaches who once praised him couldn't stand him anymore. His tantrums had gotten him benched, and without the cheers, he looked small. He glanced at me once, searching for the approval I used to give so freely. I looked away. I let him feel the emptiness. My sister wasn't much better. She tugged at her sweater, fiddled with her hair, died 3 different times that month, like she was trying to be anyone but herself. She used to bathe in compliments, but now her friends barely noticed her. Some of them came to me instead, whispering secrets they once would have trusted her with. She picked at her food, eyes lowered, like she was already fading. And my parents, my God, how they had changed. Dad still put on that booming laugh when relatives visited, but I could hear the hollowness. He used to stand tall when he introduced his perfect family, but now people's eyes drifted toward me instead, toward the daughter who had made something of herself. His smile twitched at the edges when they asked about me instead of him. Mom, she was unrecognizable. No more carefully curled hair, no more proud posture. Just tired eyes, smudged makeup, clothes wrinkled from days of wearing them. She used to glow when people praised her. Now, no one praised her at all. She stared at me across the table that night, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in her eyes I never expected. Regret. As they opened their gifts, I leaned back in my chair. For years, I had sat there empty-handed, watching them unwrap love and attention that never touched me. That Christmas, they had gifts in front of them, but none of it mattered. They were drowning in silence. My silence. I didn't have to lift a finger. When I finally left, I didn't slam the door, I didn't scream, didn't demand they see me. I just packed my bag, slipped the scholarship letter into my folder, and walked out without a goodbye. Mum cried. Dad shouted. My siblings muttered something bitter under their breath. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I knew the real revenge wouldn't come from leaving. It would come from what stayed behind. The absence, the empty chair at the table, the unanswered calls, the silence that would echo through every room of that house long after I was gone. They had taught me what it felt like to be invisible. Now I had taught them what it felt like to be erased. My life after that bloomed in ways they couldn't imagine. Professors saw me, friends loved me, neighbours admired me. I was remembered, valued, chosen. And back in that house, they shrank. Dad grew bitter, muttering to anyone who'd listen about ungrateful children. Mum withered, starved of attention until she seemed to fold in on herself. My brother drank. My sister lost herself in shallow distractions, never finding her reflection in any mirror. They didn't die. I didn't need them to. Death is final. Too easy. No, this was better. They were alive but irrelevant, alive but forgotten, because death ends pain, but being forgotten while still breathing, that's a punishment that never stops. One night, years later, I opened my last journal, the one I'd once filled with ink-stained rage and desperate words. My hand was steady as I wrote the final line. They wanted me forgotten. Instead, they're the ones no one remembers. And with that, I closed the book. I never wrote another word.